Hello, and welcome to the UTRGV TMEA All-State Virtual Etude Clinic for the 2020-2021 season. My name is Dr. Monica Martinez, and I am the Assistant Professor of Horn at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. These are going to be instructional videos that should help navigate you through these etudes in a more systematic approach, breaking everything down step by step. Feel free to email me at any time at monica.martinez@utrgv.edu if you have any questions or would like to set up a private lesson or consultation. All right, let's do it.
All right, well, I like to start these videos with some practice tips. These are pretty basic, but this is honestly things that I do, things that I recommend that my students do. So probably one of the top things is to chunk it up. You got to work up things by sections or by phrases. I think it's very important to not overwhelm yourself. It's not really going to help much if you just play from beginning to end, hoping that things will get better. I think it's important to actually chunk it up, chop it up, and work on things one phrase, one section at a time. The next thing, it's important to mark your phrases and your breath marks as well. And even if they're written on there, sometimes if there's too many, I'll X them out, or if I want to add an extra one because I feel that I need one. I think it's important to do that, and then also you'll notice if you start slow and you're going faster that your breath marks might change, and that's totally fine. The only thing that I would recommend is that if probably about 2 weeks before you're about to start working on your recordings to submit, I think it's important to stick with whatever markings that you have, and at that point it's just a consistency thing. I think you'll feel better. Everything will be more consistent if you stick with the same thing and not change it all the time. And then lastly, I like to practice in these layers. The first layer, and I think it's probably the most important, are notes and rhythm, because if the pitch and the rhythm is not right, then you're not playing the piece. The second thing is stylistic marking, so ornaments, articulations, and so forth. Adding those little things really helps to bring this character or the style of the piece, so that's important as well. The next thing, your dynamics, so louds and softs, but of course remember and keep in mind that because of the limitations that you have with your recording device, don't stress too much about this one, as I know that the judges will probably take that into consideration as well. So you want to do what you can do with the strengths that you have, and don't overdo it if it's going to cost you, with your sound and with accuracy. Last thing is your tempo. You want to start slow. That, your directors, teachers will tell you that all the time. You want to start slow. There's a reason. If you can't play it slow, then you cannot play it fast. So please be patient and work your way up to your goal. So if you notice, I'm taking this section at a time. So of course, if you're looking at this very, very first section, one of the things I put at the very top is that this section and this etude in general should be played with a very full soloistic sound. What I love about this etude actually is that it has a whole bunch of little characters to it, so I think that's a great opportunity for you to bring all these different characters forward and to show that you can do it. This beginning part, it reminds me very much of a Strauss horn concerto. We have these, long into the half step, and all of that, such a romantic era features. So something for you to consider. The last thing that I put on here was a breakdown of the turn where it's highlighted. I include, or I like to break this down by beats. So I'm going to include that E quarter note into the set of the turn with a note higher and then returning back to the same note, going a lower, sticking with that sharp sign so that your D will remain sharp as it is in the key, as it is in that measure anyways, and then return to the E. So I'm going to think of those as a set of 5, all of those fitting within beat 3 and then moving on to beat 4. Of course, you can do some subtle rubato, speeding up, slowing down, whatever floats your boat. Just make sure you still keep it within the style and the phrasing of this excerpt. Lastly, you will notice that I highlighted the key, something that I'll talk about at the very, very end. So we're in G major. And then in the end, it doesn't really matter whether you need to add a breath mark, an extra breath mark, or even take them away, as long as you stick with how you want to phrase it, how you want to play it, what's the character you're trying to portray. Moving on, we have, again, this looks like a totally different character. So with me, the main thing I see, yes, you see a lot of 16 notes, you see some staccato, some accents. Yeah, totally fine. I think the main thing with this is to play it as easy and light and effortless as possible. So I'm thinking Mozart rondos, so do not overplay this section. You can maybe start like at a mezzo piano. So don't be too soft, don't be too loud. Just somewhere right in the middle where you can just float amongst this middle part. You're kind of floating between the same block of notes anyways. Note the breath marks. Of course, you're probably already going to do them anyways, but I kind of mark those even more, either in red, or I will put BB in my music because I want to take a really big breath, because I know that I'm either going to play bigger, play fuller, or I have a bigger distance to go. So it's a control factor for me. Lastly, the highlighted part, notice how the first line and the second line are very, very similar with the exception of the last note. So you do have a C sharp at the end of the first line, and then you have a C natural at the end of the second line. So that's another important thing to note. So let's go ahead and listen to this excerpt. So again, keep it light, keep it effortless, try not to speed up or slow down too much. You still want to keep it pretty even. Next, we have a whole other style. We have very arpeggiated, big gradual crescendo, and even though it's not written, notice how I did write it myself, because I'm thinking, okay, obviously it's written in piano. I'm going to write it in that maybe I want to bump it up just a little bit to a mezzo piano, and then I'll bump it up just a little bit more to a mezzo forte, and then eventually to a forte. Of course, do what you can. Again, because of how you're recording, it might not be able to come across, but again, as long as you're keeping the flow and it's constantly churning and spinning your air, constantly moving forward, then it should be able to at least portray some of that. My inspiration here is Wagner's Das Rheingold. And then lastly, of course, you're going towards this fermata. So it's a control factor, just nice and full. So let's listen to this excerpt. And one of the things I forgot to add also is it's totally fine if you want to add some kind of a slowdown. Again, I think especially if it's not written in there, as long as it's done in a subtle way, it's totally fine. The next section, I personally love this section, you know, obviously con forza, so with force, you want to think very passionate, big playing, but again, a control factor, very, very important. So play as big as you can, but play within your limits at this point in your playing. I'm thinking, you know, Schumann, Adagio, and Allegro, nice big soloistic sound. I'm pretty much sticking to the breath marks that are in this excerpt, and I'm going to do as much as I can with the accents and the sforzandos as well. So here is an excerpt from this section. And of course, this last section is pretty much a closing part to the previous. So some things to note is that we have chromatic motion, and I did put the arrows to show you that it's basically the same exact thing. And then one of the things, because you have that slur at the top, you do not want to play them a true staccato, but you also do not want to play them to legato as well. So just I would still articulate them, but not play them too much in either direction. And of course, I would do a slight slowdown at the very end. So let's listen to this excerpt. All right, so one of the things I like to do is to close with more tips. I think it's very important. I mean, I can give you tips for days. So there's always something to work on. Remember that. So one of the things to keep in mind is we have this key. Each etude is in a specific key. So when you warm up in that key. So this one is G major scale. So you're relating it to the etude, getting your ears ready, getting your face ready. Next thing is you're going to be looking for patterns, just like I was showing you. Any repeated material, anything the same, you know, scale-like motions like the chromatic that I pointed out. Next thing, don't overdo any types of the staccatos or any articulations. You don't want to overdo those, or even your fortes. Again, good sound always comes first. So tone over tongue. Next thing is always play with your best sound. So this kind of goes with the one before. Play with what your strengths are at this moment. And then lastly, you still want to play with musicality and expression. So always remember to have fun with the music.